Hello and welcome to this special episode of the John Henry Weston Show. We're going to be speaking today with John Droz. He's an independent physicist and founder of the Alliance for Wise Energy Decisions. He's a longtime environmental advocate, and he has pushed back for decades on the far left climate agenda. He's been targeted by the left as one of the most significant activists getting in the way of liberal climate change plans in the U.S. He's particularly notable for his advocacy in North Carolina, where he's successfully lobbied state lawmakers to drop climate change plans. Now, after the 2020 election, Droz put together a team of experts, created multiple reports about election issues, part of which were used by Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell in court cases. You're going to want to stay tuned. Let's begin as we always do with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. John Droz, thank you for joining us on the program.
My pleasure, John Henry.
So how do we get from the findings, scientific findings of massive anomaly, to the fact that you reviewed, I think, 80 court cases, election challenges, and all of them being dismissed, I think at this point, nearly all of them. What do you make of that, and are there any still ongoing cases?
Okay, there's 83 or so is what we have on our list here. They have not all been dismissed. I think, I'm doing this by memory, I think there's 18 that have yet to be adjudicated out of that number.
Right.
The largest, we then divided, and I had quite a few attorneys look at this too, because I'm not an attorney, and they have their own language and all. So I had quite a few attorneys, like 20, look at this, and I've gotten some improvements. So by and large, though, they agree with what we're saying. So anyways, excuse me. The largest category that these fell into was that the category we decided were appropriate was the cases that were dismissed for legal technicalities. In other words, the case wasn't really heard, where there was evidence provided and blah, 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 blah. The case was dismissed. And that's really what happened in this most recent Supreme Court decision. They didn't hear it at all. They didn't listen to anything. They didn't look at anything. I don't know. Maybe they looked at prior things, but the whole thing up to that point was a bunch of same type of actions. Dismissed because it's moot. In other words, that was one of the reasons given by the Supreme Court. In other words, that they're saying we're not going to review this because it's too late to do anything about it.
Okay.
Well, that's absurd. That's absurd.
Well, go into that. Why is that absurd? Why shouldn't it be?
Because what's happened here is going to happen again. Mm-hmm. Unless it's fixed, we're going to just keep going through the cycle over and over again. So there was definitely a lot of things that happened were wrong. And we need to acknowledge those. We need to address those.
In your take, is it wrong enough to have swung the election?
Oh, absolutely. Again, one of the things that we tried to do was, for instance, in all our reports, we tried to purposely avoid using the word fraud as an example, because fraud has a legal connotation to it. And we're trying to be, actually, our reports are generally written for the public. So what the public term, use of the term fraud is different from what a judge or a lawyer's term of the word fraud would be. Well, that's sort of an important distinction that the press, unfortunately, just sort of dismisses. So one of the things that the press says, one of their narratives is that there hasn't been any widespread fraud in the 2020 election. Well, the key word there is widespread. That no one is defining what widespread means. At least I haven't seen it defined. See, the implication is that this isn't worth looking into unless there is extreme examples of fraud here. But that's simply not true. That's not what's the story. As anybody following the election would know, the whole election came down to 4 or 5 swing states. And widespread doesn't mean a 50% error or 20% error, or even a 10% error. In fact, if there was a 5% errors, let's say, false votes for whatever reason, that would be enough to change the entire election. So I wouldn't call a 5% amount, and actually in some cases it'd be less than 5%, but I wouldn't call 5% that the public would say that's widespread. But that's part of the misleading narrative, in my view. So from what we've seen, we've tried not to assign where the fault is. In our Pennsylvania and our Michigan report, for example, what our focus was to say, are there statistical aberrations here that are hard to explain under normal circumstances? And the answer is unequivocally yes. Mm-hmm. There is statistically.
What are the types of irregularities or of these abnormalities that you saw?
Well, types is the type of thing we didn't so much get into. We were just looking at statistics here as far as Michigan and Pennsylvania. So that's the question to say, okay, if this particular vote here by this county had one chance of 1 million of happening, the next question would be, well, what caused that? Well, that wasn't really our job. We don't have the data for that. We didn't have the time for that. All we could say is that's where the problem is. Now, here's a parallel to it. The parallel is that if you had somebody that was a neighbor of yours, a woman, let's say, married couple that had just gotten divorced, and all of a sudden the woman disappears, doesn't show up. So she's still living with her husband, former husband. So everybody starts looking and say, well, where is this woman? What happened to her? Well, they start looking to the husband and say, well, maybe he had something to do with it. Well, then it turns out she had a boyfriend. Well, maybe he had something to do with it. Well, then it turns out she had some dealings with a loan shark here. Well, maybe he had something to do with it. Blah, 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 blah. There's all sorts of possibilities. But until they can actually find a body, the law enforcement is pretty well handicapped to come up with an answer. It's easy to speculate. I could make a dozen speculations. So that's sort of what we have here. We are in a situation here where what our job is, our team's job was to come in and to find the body. So we're saying, okay, in Pennsylvania, there's 67 counties. People are saying Philadelphia is where the most corruption is. Well, maybe it is where it's a corrupt place. But the fact is, looking at the statistics, Philadelphia County wasn't even in the top 5 aberration counties. The number 1 county was Montgomery. So for people to go look in Philadelphia, even though there'd be some thought about that, is, in our view, a waste of time. They should be looking at Montgomery County.
Right. And what's the kind of extremity that you saw in Montgomery County?
Well, that's explained in our Pennsylvania report here. It just had a lot of aberrations compared to other statistical things here. In other words, comparing county to county, as they say, we compared all 67 counties to each other as one thing. So fun people can say, well, there's more absentee Democratic ballots this year, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, well, we're comparing all those things, one county to another. But looking at what happened in Montgomery County was completely different than what happened in Philadelphia County or Allegheny County or other counties like that. So it's comparing one to another. Another would be to compare 2020 results to 2016 results, as an example. So we were limited by the amount of data we actually had, but statisticians, I mean, they're numbers people. So the more numbers you give them, the more they can analyze it. So the bottom line is that we identified the 5 worst counties in Pennsylvania, and that's effectively where the body is. So the next level is required that somebody has to do an investigation there, somebody like Russ Ramblin or somebody else to come in and do a forensic audit of one or more of those counties. That would be the appropriate thing to do. Just like an investigator would look at a body. Once we found the body, then the question is, okay, how did they die? Who did it? And then there's some other people in the series here that have to do their job. Our job was to get the ball rolling in the right direction.
Right. So At this point, such an investigation even doesn't look very hopeful, at least from my vantage point. Does it look hopeful from yours?
You mean hopeful for happening?
Yes.
Well, probably not. Unfortunately, I would say from what we know, there has been a few. There's one going on in Arizona. I pronounce it Maricopa County. That's one that they are doing some investigation on, but by and large, they haven't done. And I think a lot of it has to do with the media mantra saying, well, there really isn't that big a problem here. And yeah, there may be some really extreme abnormalities, but it isn't worth the time and trouble to look into. On the other hand, I do know we have gotten to know some legislators, and some legislators, particularly in states where the legislators are a GOP, they are trying to do something about it. So, for instance, in Georgia this last week, they did pass some what appears to be some meaningful legislation in the Assembly, the House of Georgia. And the Senate is working on something similar, maybe even more strong. On the other hand, people on the left here, they're talking about things like HR1, whatever. This is really bad stuff in my view here. And my big picture view here, John, is that the left keeps outmaneuvering the right here on all of these issues, and there's two reasons why. The two reasons why?
Yes.
The two reasons why are, and I say this from being in this business, if you will, for 50 years. So I've worked with thousands of people. So my view is that there's two problems with people on the right. Number one, I'm talking about particularly groups, let's say conservative organizations in the United States. These are at least people who have some money, some presence here as far as the media, whatever. First problem is that these groups here, even though they have a lot of commonality of interest, they don't work very well together. They just don't. I mean, this is an enormous mixed opportunity in my view. I'm talking about people like Heritage, Heartland, CEI, blah, blah, blah. These are groups here. So part of that is that I took the time and trouble to actually do some research to say, how many conservative-leaning groups are there, national ones, in the United States? Have you seen a list of that?
No.
I didn't. I couldn't find one, so I made up one by doing some research. So in checking it out, going to their website, looking into what their mission statement, stuff like that was, I was able to identify. We're talking about conservative-leaning, national, not local, regional groups, national groups here. I was able to identify, I've said at this point, over 130.
Wow.
Well, that's right. That's typically the answer. Most people, if I ask how many conservative-leaning national groups are there, they say, well, 10 to 15 or 20 or something like that. Well, I have the names of 130. So that's part of the problem. Think of what we could do if these 130 people were working together. 130 groups, working together. But no. The irony is, if you look at on the other side, the left is working together. Comparable organizations. So if you take the Sierra Club, Union of Concerned Scientists, Greenpeace, et cetera, those people actually work together. They have meetings. They come up with plans of actions here. They come up with messaging. The whole kit and caboodle. They work together significantly more than groups do on the right. To me, that's an extraordinary deficiency here. I'm a big believer in some simple idioms like united we stand, divided we fall. I don't know what's going to take before people on the right saying, hey, what we're doing here isn't working. So that's problem number one. And believe me, I'm saying this from the outside. I'm saying this from working with these people very closely. Second problem is that in messaging, the people on the right here just have very little understanding of public relations and what I would call more sophisticated communication. They're antiquated in what their messaging is based on. Again, if you look at to the left, say, how does the left doing on messaging? Oh my God, it's hugely different, hugely different. The left understands messaging much, much better than the right does. So, as a simple example, the left here has decided some time ago that an important part of getting their message across is that they had to infuse into the vocabulary words, phrases that were supportive of their agenda. So, like what? Well, I've identified like 50. So, an example is the phrase wind farm. Okay, so there's no such thing as a wind farm. That's a completely made up phrase. Wind farm doesn't exist. The only thing that's farmed on a wind facility is subsidies. But they know they're going into rural areas here, and they knew that rural people wouldn't be particularly happy about having an industrial wind complex plopped down in their backyard or on a farm field or whatever else. So they purposefully came up with the phrase, this is a wind farm, because they wanted to send a message that this was bucolic, pastoral, stuff like that. It's none of those things. It's a complete lie. It's an industrial complex. But the left knew that to convey this to the public, they had to re-message what was really going on here. So to me, that's an example of, I give you clean energy. There's a whole bunch of them. In fact, I'll send you a paper. I put together a list of some of these. So number one is that these people are doing this on the left. Now, if I look for examples that are on the right, I see like, I don't know, 1% of what's being done on the left here, a huge difference. The people on the right don't get the importance of the vocabulary in our vernacular. They just don't get it. I mean, I'll ask you, you can tell me any examples that the right has made up these type of things that sell their message. I don't know any.
No, it does seem like there's a big move. Concession is a very good, seemingly way we do things on the right. It's funny. From our own field, we know that we had the marriage wars over same-sex marriage, and we've insisted on using scare quotes around the term marriage. But most of our own colleagues in the same fight have said, "Oh, well, no, that we've got to go past that." So there is a definite want to concede. And I find that with a lot of conservatives, the want to just, but we want to be normal, so we have to give in on this, that, and the other thing. It's a very strong tendency, I find, with people on the right, for sure.
Well, I agree with you 100% here. And I said the same thing. I've got up at meetings here with scientists and say, please extract the phrase wind farm out of your vocabulary. There is no such thing. You want to say wind facility or wind project or a whole bunch of other alternative things you can say. And then the very next person who gets up, a PhD, conservative, says wind farm. Not purposely, but just, as a matter of rote, just used to saying wind farm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're just not paying attention. And that's what I mean. We're losing the PR messaging war here because the left here is much more tuned in about what needs to be done as far as messaging. So the public is buying a lot of the baloney sold by the left because the right isn't working together to come up with uniformity. And number two, has little understanding of communication, PR techniques here to be utilizing here.
Wow. That's great.
So to me, those are the two big things. And I would hope you and your group here write about that, because we need to bring more attention to that. That has to be fixed.
Absolutely.
If it isn't fixed, we're lost here.
Awesome. John Droz, thank you so much for being with us on this episode of the John Henry Weston Show, and may God bless you.
Thank you, John Henry. I appreciate the opportunity.
And God bless all of you. We'll see you next time. Hi, this is John Henry Weston, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of LifeSite News. I'm coming to you today because we want to be sure that we're communicating clearly with you, our loyal followers. Things are really heating up, as I'm sure you can see. Christians, conservative truth tellers are being targeted, are being banned from social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at an alarmingly fast rate. They are attempting to suppress any narrative that does not fit that of the mainstream media. We knew this day would come. We have been warning everyone who would listen and attempting to build up alternative platforms to continue to reach you. We have established ourselves on all sorts of platforms I'm going to explain in a minute, but the most important thing to do is come direct to lifesitenews.com, because there we will always be. But we've also established ourselves on platforms like Parler and MeWe, and our videos can be found on Rumble as well. We would love to see each of you on those platforms too, as they are not censoring or suppressing the truth that we are sharing every single day. More than these alternative social media platforms, we highly encourage you to subscribe to our email newsletter. We have really built up a large list of loyal readers on our email marketing platform, and we have prepared several backup plans for, well, I want to say if, but it's really when, we are removed from our current platform as well. Additionally, I really encourage you, as I said before, to make it a regular habit to go directly to lifesitenews.com. Make it your homepage. While all of these different platforms are an excellent way to curate your news, going directly to our website means that you will never encounter any censorship or sudden loss of LifeSite News reporting. Here's the thing. We will never stop sharing the truth. We founded this organization with the mission to be the life, family, and culture source for men and women who seek to know the truth. We have established a track record of honest reports, and this will never stop, even with censorship happening around the globe. Again, I'm encouraging you to join us on Parler, MeWe, Rumble, and on our email list. You can find all the direct links in the description of this video. May God bless you and keep you, and we are so thankful that you've chosen to follow and support LifeSite News. I'm John Henry Weston, co-founder and editor-in-chief of LifeSite News.